And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is the MLR Power Rankings for Week 16 of the 2023 season. 16, guys. We are down to the nitty gritty. Only 2 weeks left in the regular season. The playoff picture is almost wrapped up. Two spots have been pretty much taken in each conference. There's one spot left with technically two spots left, one in each conference. Four teams fighting for those two spots. So it is coming down to the wire. Things can kind of wrap up by the end of next week. Or, I mean, this weekend's games, week number 17. I'll go a little bit more into detail of that in my other video when I talk about when we preview next week's games. But let's talk about this week. As evident with our Super Root Pick'ems, not a lot of changes this week simply because results were pretty much the way that a lot of us predicted they would be. The teams that won. The teams that didn't win, that we didn't predict to win, didn't win. No real big upsets. Maybe one game where it could have went either way. Again, we'll go into details with that. But spoiler alert, there really was no change in this week's rankings. So let's start from the bottom as we normally do, and let's go with a team that might finish at the bottom of this year's power rankings. Our neighbors to the north, the Toronto Arrows, who unfortunately got trounced once again this week, losing to the Houston SaberCats 48-26. A pretty tough game. We'll go over a little bit more of the game because it was really more Houston side when we talk about the Houston SaberCats. But it just wasn't very good for Toronto. Again, Toronto pretty much eliminated from the Eastern Conference. Not a lot to play for. Right now, what a lot of the players on the Toronto side, because they are mostly Canadian nationals, are kind of fighting for a spot on the national team. Now, again, unfortunately, just like America, Canada did not qualify for this year's Rugby World Cup. So, again, not a lot for some of the Toronto Nationals to play for either, except for the younger players wanting to be on the Toronto national team. There is still going to be international competition this summer. Both USA and Toronto have some games coming up. So, again, it is an honor to be capped as a national player. Just both sides, both America and Toronto, not necessarily a lot to play for World Cup wise, but never too early to prepare for the next World Cup in 2028. But with that being said, Toronto could still play spoiler in the next couple weeks. We'll see. But unfortunately, they stay at the number 12 spot. Be honest again, not looking very confident that they will move out of that spot. Number 11, another team that's kind of been sitting in the doldrums for pretty much this entire season. The new kids on the block, the Chicago Hounds, who unfortunately once again are on the losing side, this time losing to arguably the best team in the league, the San Diego Legion, losing 14-36. It was close at the half, 14-7. Chicago only down by a try. Unfortunately, as is tradition with this Chicago team, by the second half, San Diego completely pulled away. Chicago not doing much in regards to putting up a fight. Again, it is almost like a broken record. It is kind of baffling to see such a team like Chicago with the lineup that they have to be only producing one win this season. I don't feel they'll win two like their Dallas counterparts, but never say never. Unfortunately, Chicago is looking like they'll probably be remaining in the lower half or the lower bottom four teams by the end of this season. Moving on, Nola Gold in your number 10 spot, losing this week to Old Glory DC 15-28. Interesting news, Reese Botha getting the first start of his MLR career in the fly half position over Rodney Iona, who started off really hot for the Nola Gold. Unfortunately, has been struggling a lot with injuries. I think this is the third time he's been on the injury list since being first hurt near midseason. To be honest, this game was really, really sloppy, And unfortunately for both sides, the kicking game was really, really horrible. Combined, both Nola and Old Glory were 2 for 9 off of the tee. Nola had Tito Diaz Bonilla and Grayson Boyd kicking for them. Old Glory had Tito Diaz Bonilla and Grayson Boyd. Grayson Boyd has been struggling quite a bit as a kicker, while Tito Diaz Bonilla last year was pretty consistent. This year, unfortunately, has not found his form. And of course, Reese Botha, 1 for 2 off of the tee in replacement for Rodney Iona. Again, didn't really come into play here in this game, considering Nola only scored 1 try and then 1 penalty try. But Old Glory walked away with the victory in this one. Coming in the number 9 spot, Rugby ATL losing to the best team in the Eastern Conference, the New England Free Jacks, 35-14. This game started off pretty competitive. Atlanta tied up the game at one point with a try by Martini Talapusi, a national sevens player for the USA Eagles. Unfortunately, by the second half, New England pulled away. Paul Bellicana coming off with a huge try, his 12th try of the season, tying at one point the lead try scorer, Joe Mono. I'll go into Joe Mono as we talk about Utah. But in the end, New England was too much for Atlanta, coming off with the win, 35-14. We'll go a little bit more over New England's side of the story when we talk about them. Staying in the number 8 spot, even though they lost, but all the teams below them lost just as well. Dallas Jackals, coming off of a bye, not enough to give them the win over a very tough and a very improving Rugby New York Ironworkers, your reigning defending MLR champions, who we'll just talk about them because they are in the number 7 spot right next to them. New York was struggling throughout the mid part of the season, but now it looks like a lot of their players are coming back from injury, just enough to take out the Dallas Jackals, who unfortunately in this game looked a lot less power driven as they normally are. Again, not a lot for Dallas to play for. Definitely a lot more for New York to play for, considering they've yet to secure a playoff spot. We'll go into in essence, a playoff eliminator game in their next game next week against Rugby ATL. But in this game, New York pretty much had the win to stay in the playoff hunt. They were very dominant, 43-13. Dallas started off the game striking first, but then after that, it was all New York. They scored 4 tries within the first half. And then in the second half, 3 more tries to put away Dallas. Shout out to Connor Buckley, who had a great game for Rugby New York. He had a brace, 2 tries in the game. Like I said, New York is going into next week facing off against Rugby ATL. That game will pretty much determine if Rugby ATL stays into the playoff hunt. If they lose, New York secures themselves the final playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. If Rugby ATL wins, they stay in the hunt for at least one more week as they go into the last week of the MLR season. Then, moving in the number 6 spot, we're going to Old Glory DC, who, as mentioned before, did just enough to defeat Nola Gold in their game. Like I mentioned before, the kicking game in this game was really, really something to... was very lacking in that game. 2 for 9 combined between both teams. Not a great game for any of the kickers on either team. But Old Glory, again, just enough to stay in that number 6 spot. We mentioned them before. Number 5 spot, the Houston SaberCats, who are also fighting for a playoff spot in that Western Conference, did enough, well, more than enough technically, to put away the worst team arguably in the league right now, the Toronto Arrows, 48-26. Houston scoring a combined 7 tries in that game, including 2 tries to Loritz Vandersijf, who had a brace in the game. Very good performance by the Houston SaberCats as they go into week number 17 with the possibility of still securing that final playoff spot. Speaking of another team fighting for that final playoff spot, the Utah Warriors, who unfortunately suffered a loss against one of the top two teams in the league, the Seattle Seawolves. Now, this was one where I had to really think about this because Utah did lose. And granted, Houston did win. But Houston beat, again, arguably the worst team in the league. While Utah's game against the Seattle Seawolves, I'll spoil it, the number 2 team on the power rankings, was a very, very close game. I mean, it was very back and forth at the start. Joe Mono, shout out to him, who scored his 13th, and then later on will score his 14th try of the season to lead the MLR league this season with tries. It was a very much a back and forth game. In the end, Seattle barely pulled it off in the end. Utah was able to get within 7 points from Joe Mono's second try to allow them to get the losing bonus point, which may come into a factor as we go into the final 2 weeks of the season. Seattle trying to look for that 4th try to get that bonus point win. Unfortunately, though they had the ball in the last waning minutes of the game, had a knock on, so unfortunately the game was called off. The fact that Seattle did not get that bonus point might hurt them in the end in order to get maybe the Western Conference title. They did secure themselves the 2nd playoff spot, so worst case scenario, they will finish 2nd, hosting the semifinal game of the Western Conference playoffs, but there's a good possibility if San Diego wins their next game, and San Diego is going to go against the Toronto Arrows next week, chances are San Diego will probably win that game. If San Diego at least gets a bonus point win in that game, they will secure themselves the Western Conference title, and Seattle will be out of the running for that. But again, Seattle did secure themselves a playoff spot. They just have not necessarily secured themselves the number 1 seed like San Diego has the possibility of doing. Like I said again, San Diego hasn't secured it yet. They have to get a bonus point victory in order to secure that spot. Moving over to the Eastern Conference, number 3 team, the New England Free Jacks. Again, they had a dominant performance over the Atlanta Rugby411 Atlanta. In the game, New England, pretty dominant. It was their 8th straight win of the 8th straight win. They're on an 8-win winning streak. Pretty dominant performance over Rugby ATL. Shout out to Connor McClare, who had a brace in the game for New England. Again, New England looking like the dominant team in the Eastern Conference. They do have themselves a bye going into the playoffs. They have the number 1 overall record for the Eastern Conference and the Eastern Conference title. It will be interesting to see if in the next 2 weeks they will rest any of their starters, because they really have nothing to play for anymore. They have secured everything. It will be interesting to see if they rest all their starters going into the final 2 weeks in order to make sure that everybody is healthy going into the playoffs. Then, of course, we have, again, the number 2 team that defeated the Utah Warriors, the Seattle Seawolves. Great game for them. Like I said, it was very, very close. Only concerning thing about Seattle, unfortunately, their star fly half, AJ Alatimu, did get hurt in the game halfway through. He was not able to finish the game. That is a little concerning going into the playoffs. As I mentioned before, Seattle was not able to secure a bonus point win, so they still do not have the number 1 spot. I mean, they're not out of the running for that. San Diego, who is the number 1 team in the power rankings, could secure that number 1 spot if they get a bonus point victory next week over the Toronto Arrows. So Seattle still in contention, but not getting that bonus point victory this weekend might bite them in the butt. And even though they do get the number 2 spot, might run them of not being able to get the number 1 spot. Now, speaking of the San Diego Legion, who were able to score themselves a victory over the Chicago Hounds, huge victory for them. They set a lot of records this weekend. For all of that information, you can always go to MLR Stats on their Instagram page. They are a great follow. They have all the numbers. A lot of those numbers I was able to pull off of MLR Stats, for a shout out to them. But San Diego Legion, with that victory, It's the 50th victory in their franchise history. They are the first team in MLR history to score 50 wins. They are also the quickest to do that in 70. Let me see that again. In 79 games. Fastest team to ever do that. One game behind them is Seattle. Seattle is at 49 games. But if they win that next game, which they probably will against the Toronto Arrows, they would have done 50 games, though, in 83 total game attempts. So San Diego is the fastest team to get 50 and the first team to get 50 in MLR history. Not only that, this is San Diego's 11th win in a row. That is a Major League Rugby record, as well as they have scored a total of 64 points in the league, which is a record as well for a season total, breaking the LA Guiltinis. Love them. The LA Guiltinis, who set that record of 63 points in 2021. Also, too, with this win for San Diego, it's their 13th win of the overall season. That is tied with New England. I'm sorry, tied with Old Glory. No, I'm sorry, tied with New England, who set that record last year with 13 wins. San Diego has the possibility of breaking that again if they beat the Toronto Arrows, or at least if they win one more game within the last 2 weeks, they can break New England's record of 13 wins in the entire season. So big shout out to San Diego for setting so many MLR records, 50 wins, tied for most wins in one season, a record-breaking 11-game win streak, as well as the most points so far in one season by a team. So congratulations to San Diego, who are looking like the dominant team right now overall in the league. But again, guys, we are getting to the nitty-gritty. Seattle is still right behind San Diego. New England's looking a little hot, really hot. New York is fighting their way into that final playoff spot. And who knows what's going to happen between Utah and Houston. I'll go more into details of all that in the next video where we preview next week's games. But before we go into that, let's go over our Super Brew Pick'em results. Like I mentioned before, pretty much everyone got all the teams right in this one. So there's a lot of ties, a lot of very little parity between everybody, but one player was able to step out beyond everybody else. And that is CrossFox, who got the gold cap this season, this week. 11 points. Congratulations to you, CrossFox. Like I mentioned, pretty much everybody in the top 5 were able to get all the teams correct. Not a lot of surprises this week. Next week is going to be a little bit more challenging. But CrossFox sits at top with 11. SD Cow Guy came in second with 9.75 points. BT Woodrow, 9.5. And then tied for fourth, Jahego, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. And James A6117 with 9 points. Unfortunately, Julie EGW got the wooden spoon with 3 points this week. Overall standings, a little bit of changes. Still sitting at the top, MSDRFC 83, Matt with 108.83 points. 6 points behind him is SD Cow Guy, 102.83. Moving up a spot, Jahego. Again, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, with 97.99 points. Dropping down one spot, John Hawkins, 95.58. And then moving up a shocking 3 because of how well he did this week, James A6117 with 94.40 points, making him sit at the 5th spot. So, again, only 2 weeks left in the season, in the regular season, so only 2 weeks left of picks. I know some people have stopped making picks just because they're a long shot from making the top, but don't let that stop you. Still make the picks. I'm nowhere near the top 10, but I'm still making my picks as well. And of course, top 5, you guys got to keep going. You guys got to try to chase down MSDRFC 83. SD Cow Guy is only 6 points away. You can make that up technically in 1 week, but it's going to be an exciting race, just like the playoffs with the MLR season. So, once again, it's getting down to the nitty-gritty. I know I've been saying that a lot of times, but it's really, really exciting. We'll be even more excited as we preview next week's games. Only 2 weeks left in the MLR season. It's crazy how fast this season has gone. Hope you guys have been enjoying it. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the pitch.